Hello, I am Nichole Holtvluwer. I am the owner of Radicle Beginnings, a consulting business that works with adults to help you help the child. And I also have the opportunity to do some work with Monti Kids, one of my favorite organizations out there for materials and learning for the child during these first years of life. I'm a new mom and we use the Monti Kids materials at home with our daughter, which is wonderful. And I am here with my friend and colleague, Stacy Keane, who is the head of learning for Monti Kids. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what modern Montessori is. But before we get started, Stacy, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role at Monti Kids?
Awesome. Thanks. And thank you for being here. I'm so excited to talk about this. My role at Monti Kids has grown since I've left the classroom. I was a teacher for 14 years. I taught in a Montessori primary classroom for 5 years. And then my heart will always be with those young toddlers where I taught for 9 years. And then I was lucky to find Monti Kids in its early years and came on as a member of the learning team, and my role has organically grown into something wonderful. And my most proud training is I have 3 Montessori children of my own who are growing into little adults. They're about to be 13, 12, and one just turned 7. So they're my proudest achievement so far.
I love it. And you and I have our same training from the Montessori Institute of Denver, but at different time frames.
Yes.
Which I think is neat because we kind of come from the same ideas around Montessori and have very authentic training, if we want to use that word, through the Association Montessori International. And we both got to train with Judy O'Ryan, who is just a light in the community, especially.
Maestro, right?
Yes, especially for this early age of life that we know is so, so important. So let's talk a little bit about what modern Montessori is. That's what we're here to talk about today. So obviously you and I have had lots of conversations over the years and especially recently about this, but can you explain it to me like I've never heard this concept?
I can, or I'll do my best. So in a nutshell, Monti Kids, we really want to make Montessori education accessible, right, to a new generation of parents that we've seen and gotten to interact with. And we want to do that through innovation and adaptability. And I want to make a side note here, but also a very important side note about what we mean by innovation. And we're really aiming to innovate on the delivery of Montessori to parents and its accessibility, not on the methodologies or the message, right? Those are timeless and those are proven. We know that. This method really, it's been around for over 100 years, right? And in that time, the world in which we're raising children has changed dramatically when you compare it to 115 years ago, right? And so while we believe, right, that the method is fundamentally universal in its application to children, for babies and toddlers, we don't doubt that. And parents and children, though, through the years have been adapting, with each generation in this evolving world. And so it kind of dawned on me and us as a company, like, well, then how come a method that's built on these tenets of observation and adaptation isn't doing the same, right? Like, how come we aren't meeting that, right, need for parents? And so, on the one hand, there's a fear in the Montessori community, right, that change might bring dilution or impurities, right? And as we've discussed it, we just really disagree with that and wholeheartedly believe that it's actually going to bring a deeper and more well-rounded understanding of what this method is, right? And furthermore, like, I really feel like it's almost at this point in today's world, it's like riddled with isolation and competition and these like perfect Instagram moments. It's almost a disservice not to make it more accessible for parents to reach and find ways to meet parents, where they are on their journey as parenting, and not to have them meet Montessori where it's been for all these years, right? So let's find a way that we can meet parents and bring that into their lives in a balanced way. So that's in kind of a big nutshell.
Yeah, and I love that. If you've heard me speak before, I like to think that like Maria and I would have been buddies. I don't think that we need to, I mean, she deserves to be put up on a pedestal, but I also think that if she was here today, she would want to see and be part of these changes. And like you said, adaptations happening where we're keeping the timelessness of it the same, but our world is vastly different from when Dr. Montessori was doing her work. So kind of redefining some of the pieces seems not only necessary, but like you said, making it accessible. And that's what she wanted too, is for this method to be accessible to everyone. So I love that. I love that piece. And we've talked, about this idea of modern Montessori, and it's kind of built by design to empower parents and caregivers to be their child's first guide. And I think sometimes that gets a little confusing, right? What does it mean to be a guide? So can you tell me a little bit more about this concept of being a child's first guide?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I think we all know, many parents, you and I most certainly know how critical this first period of development from birth to 3 is for children. I mean, if you think about it, is there another time in life where a human looks or behaves so differently than a newborn and a 3-year-old? Puberty, maybe, but I can't think of another time, right, where they're so vastly different in their capabilities and their awareness. And yet this is also a time when children spend most of their time primarily at home with their family and caregivers. And they're kind of left to support this massively important time for growth and learning, kind of accidentally or by default, and therefore becoming their first guide, if you will. We really believe that parents shouldn't have to be their first teacher, which sometimes you'll hear that phrase, they're their first teacher, but that implies a level of expertise that you and I might have working with children in a classroom and with very specific training, but we just don't think parents have the time or energy to, take all that in and do it. So rather, thinking about them as a guide, right? Helping them to notice changes in their baby. What are you looking for? What did you observe? And then helping them to interpret the meaning and provide tools for them to develop, right? And put in their way as they see fit. So really encouraging this sort of unique path and developing according to their own pace. And hopefully providing these solutions for parents that are science-backed, right? Make it just that much more accessible and easier to implement without having to know all of the details that are in all of our albums, right? So yeah, that just being their guide, right? Putting things in their way, shining light on things that we observe and know they'll find interest in.
Yes, I love that. And I love the idea of taking away this idea of I have to teach my child, because they're going to learn from us no matter what we do, right? Because we know that the child's absorbing and taking all of this information in, and during these first 3 years, they're doing it effortlessly. I mean, it's just incredible. But parents and caregivers are often kind of left to their own devices of what do I do with this time? And I used to joke, like, it feels a lot like we're one step behind the child. Like they're always a little bit ahead of us and we're playing catch up.
Right.
And that's a hard place to be as a parent, right? And as a caregiver. And I even see that with my daughter now, and how helpful it can be when we have support and have kind of this village. And the village looks differently. And I think maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the conversation. But our villages are so different, and that modern Montessori needs to take that into account, that things look different than how they looked 100+ years ago. So why is it important to you and Monti Kids to make a shift to modern Montessori?
That's a great question. I think as a teacher and in my, almost 2 decades in this Montessori community, I've heard so many times, and maybe you have too, that, Montessori is for every child. It's just maybe not for every family, right? And it's the families that sometimes people will say, well, they just don't want to put in the effort, or they turn on the TV all the time, or, this and that. And there's some judgment there, right? And we really want to change that sentiment, right? That Montessori can be for every family, not just for every child. And we want to meet them where they are. And if that means that you need some screen time while you're cooking dinner, then that's what it means for your family, right? And we just really wholeheartedly believe that Montessori can be the answer for all parents and babies and families. And we just really want to make it our mission to make that accessible and reach parents where they want to be reached. And that's it, right? Plain and simple.
Right. Absolutely. This idea that Monti Kids is believing that Montessori is the answer for all parents and caregivers, and to make it the mission to be accessible. This is why I align with you all. Like, this is why I am such a full supporter and backer of Monti Kids, because I think you're taking this idea and this, keeping the core of Montessori there and whole, but also expanding on it and growing it. And I think that is what we all need to be doing in our careers right now, instead of kind of gatekeeping this information,
right.
sharing it in a way where people understand and can utilize it. And that I think Montessorians sometimes get into a little bit of a disservice for families when we're using terms that maybe people don't understand, and we have to define those for people or use different language. When you all first started calling the materials toys, for me, I was like, wait, it's materials. For my training, it's materials. And then having a conversation with, why are we calling it toys? That totally makes sense. It totally makes sense why we're calling it toys, because they are. And toys have value too, right?
Yes,
calling it materials 100%. Or toys doesn't matter between the two. I mean, I've got my sign back here that plays the work of the child. Like, playing with toys is no different than playing with materials. So I love that aspect about what Monti Kids is doing. So on kind of that same note, can you give an example of how modern Montessori might provide an antidote to some of the current parenting and caregiving dilemmas that we're seeing out there?
Ooh, this is a good one. Yes, I think it's, in 3 sort of simple but big words. It's, through connection and balance and empowerment, right? These are at the core sort of benefits of that we would like parents to feel when applying a modern Montessori approach, right? We want to empower you to be that guide and to know that you're capable. And we want to provide you balance between being authentic and to its core values of Montessori, but also understanding that this world is different and the world you're parenting in right now requires some balance there. And then also connection for us really, parents today are often missing that, right? And they're missing the support. Parenting can be so isolating sometimes, right? And, we have this fact that as we were researching this, that anthropologists say that in 99% of human history, children and babies and families have been raised in villages and in community. And that last 1% has happened in these most recent generations of separation and suburbia and, who knows, technology and everything else. The village has kind of been replaced with a community that sort of lacks authenticity and is controlled kind of from the outside in instead of the inside out, right? Where we're all kind of learning from each other and passing down traditions and learnings and all sorts of things, what to do when my baby's sick and what to do when there's a tantrum. You had an aunt to share that with you, or a grandfather to tell a story about your parents. And so it's just very different now with this kind of, beauty of being able to travel all over the world, but also then we don't live near each other in the same ways sometimes.
Yeah. And what we're seeing of community is less authentic because a lot of times it's curated on social
Of course.
media.
Yeah.
And, you think, yes, we're learning so much from other people, from perfect strangers sometimes, that we're learning from, but also we're not seeing what you would have seen in the village of the day-to-day and the reality of that. And that's such a huge piece. I've never heard those numbers before, but I got goosebumps when you were telling me, and also got a little emotional because it's such a disservice to our children to not be in community. But how do we do that? And that's not what you're looking to change here, right? You're just looking to better support parents knowing that this is the way it is. That sounds about right.
Yeah, for sure. And we really think that parents who do end up engaging with this sort of modern Montessori community, will be able to rebuild this connection, whether it's through, online meetups, but in-person meetups of smaller cohorts. And therefore they're able to find sort of, again, that balance, and they're discovering joy and empowerment in their own journey, right? And knowing that what they're doing is also wonderful and to be honored.
I'm part of the Facebook group because we're Monti Kids subscribers, which has been really fun to go from the teacher side to the parent side. And I don't interact too often because it's really hard for me to take off my teacher hat and not answer the question as a seasoned Montessorian. But what I do is read through what people are saying and kind of see what the community is talking about. And it's really lovely to see how supportive everyone is of each other. Where again, it's strangers, but it feels different from that curated Instagram perfect picture of your shelf, and is more like, hey, my child's not working with this. How could I present it in a different way? Or what do I need to do different? Or do I just need to wait and be patient? And then you have all these other adults, whether it's parents or, I see grandparents on there sometimes. It's really lovely to see that it's not just for the parents too, that it is taking into account how do we make a village out of what we have available to us right now, which is so Montessori, right?
Adaptation, right? And all of that.
So again, kind of on that same note, is what are you most excited about surrounding this shift to modern Montessori?
Gosh, there's like 100 of them, but I think one of them, which we've alluded to already in this conversation, is these barriers to starting or learning for parents more, to learning more about Montessori. So we hear it's too rigid or too hard to implement. It's elitist in some ways. And again, gatekeeping. And I just really think that's a giant misunderstanding, right? And being able to have an opportunity to kind of flip that and change these misconceptions is really exciting for me. I think, I don't want people to hear the word Montessori anymore and say oh, no, that's too weird for me, or that's too hard. I'm just ready for people to understand it in a way that is joyful and loving, like the method itself, right?
Well, and that I often think about how Maria Montessori didn't want this to be named after her. She didn't want it to be called Montessori. She just wanted this to be the way we were with children.
Yes.
And I think when we change that perspective and kind of take that label off, there's so much power in the word Montessori. And again, I don't want to take away from what Dr. Montessori created, but at the same time, my goal as an educator and just a human on this planet is I just want this to be the way it is and not feel elitist and not feel like it's, that's only for rich kids in private schools. And I think that's a beautiful piece of this modern Montessori also, is that, at least in the United States, it's hard to get your child into a Montessori school. It's hard to, even if you have the finances, it still can be hard to get a spot. Childcare challenging right now. And so making this attainable for adults. I mean, think about nannies learning from Monti Kids. Think about, like, there's so many adults that can be served by this outside of just the parents, and it's the child that benefits. And that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
What else? Any other things you're excited for in regards to this modern Montessori?
I think the other one that really jumps out is that it's been a real puzzle trying to find the balance between adapting language and distilling the knowledge that Dr. Montessori has provided, but while also really never compromising on authenticity and keeping true to the core values. It's like, which words can we change and adapt to help, further their understanding, but not ever getting far from the core. And that was a really exciting and fun puzzle to solve. And I'm not only confident that we did it, but I can't wait to share it and spread it across the world. But also ultimately this will mean that authentic Montessori will be in more homes with more families and become, the way, if you will, right? And like you said, like it's just the way that we should be with children. And I think that's a true reward is being able to share it with that many more children and families.
So I'm curious your opinion, because this is a big topic in the Montessori world. And we've already touched on it a little bit, but do you feel like modern Montessori is still authentic to Montessori?
Yes, resoundingly. Absolutely. I think we're authentic to our core and to the values of Montessori and Dr. Montessori's teachings. In everything we do, we, from our new toy designs to AMI trained educators being on our learning team who are here to work with parents and support them, and our parents themselves often, and also to our curriculum, where we all have a hand in guiding and creating parents to become a partner with them. But it all starts from these core values in Montessori first. And then it's just, again, in the delivery and in occasionally the vocabulary and things like that, where we've made some adjustments to make it accessible and approachable, right? Like, I want to talk to that mom at the park, right? So we did actually come up with 5 tenets of modern Montessori. So these were designed to support parents in these early years, but are derived from Dr. Montessori's work. So the first one is thinking holistically about a child's development, right? So we're supporting their confidence and independence, but thinking about like 360 degrees of their life. Modern Montessori is no longer just shelf work. We're thinking about social emotional wellness and feeding and sleep support if you need it, and all of the parts that bring together this little being, right? And support this being on their development. And the second one is designing a home environment, right, that supports their independence and their ability to care for themselves and for their space. So this is as simple as putting things in their reach that they're supposed to use or that they'd like to use, and thinking about
things out of their reach that you don't want them to use, right?
Exactly.
Like we try to create our home to be a yes environment. So anything that our child can reach is safe for her for the most part. I mean, she finds stuff every once in a while where I'm like, oops.
We're always learning, right? Yeah.
Where did you find that? But I think that part's important too, to think about not only what are we putting on the shelf, but what are we taking away?
I love that kind of perspective on it. Is, again, like, the world and the physical environment says no enough to toddlers, right? Like, just the size of our furniture in a lot of ways says no, to them. And so thinking of ways, like you said, to remove those obstacles and replace with things that are yes. Yeah, go for it. Climb that, do this, put that in your mouth, all of that.
The best way we've learned to kind of baby proof our house, and I use that term because it's a popular term, right? Baby proofing. But the way that we baby proof our house is we go through the house with our child because she's going to show us what's safe and unsafe, right? So that's been really fascinating too. But how do you learn that, right? And I love that Monti Kids, through this idea of modern Montessori, is taking into account, that we're going beyond shelf work. We're going beyond that to partner with parents and caregivers, and that partnership is crucial. We know that from teaching, right? That was part of our work, is partnering with the child's adults.
Yes.
And I think that's a beautiful piece to Monti Kids. All right, so we've done 2. What's the third one?
So the third tenet is modeling. Might be the nearest and dearest to my heart, but modeling how our culture and our communities work through rich language, grace and courtesy, using kind words, and including our children. When you said that about taking Edie around, like, let's explore the space and see where things should be added or maybe removed, but including them in our daily tasks around the house and in our day-to-day lives is really important for them to absorb how our culture and our community is working.
I often think to myself, I want children to feel like they're contributing and valued members of their community. So I feel valued and I feel like I'm contributing in whatever way that looks. But I think that can sometimes be a hard concept if you haven't been around children a lot. So this idea that Monti Kids can partner with parents to help them understand, what does it look like to be a contributing and valued member of the family, of the home, of whatever setting you're in. Even we just were with family on Sunday, and it was lovely to see Edie being part of the family, not this outside thing that everyone's thinking, oh, you're so cute.
Right.
But to see her, she had a spot at the table, right? She was in a chair with a booster. She's part of the family. And I think that piece is so important for children, to feel that connection and not feel like an outsider.
Yeah, and research
that's near and dear to my heart too.
Well, and research shows, right, contribution and being a part of community and needed and valued member of the family is one of the greatest contributors to self-esteem and confidence as they grow up. So win-win all around there.
Totally. Sure. I like that one's sandwiched in the middle. That's a good number 3.
It is.
Well, yeah. It's like the core of it.
The fourth one is that we want to provide children with materials, activities, and experiences that are intentionally designed and put in their space, so that they're active within this learning zone, right? So we can notice and observe things in their behavior or in their readiness that, wow, you're really starting to swing your arms around. I'm going to put a batting ball in your space, right? And let's see what happens. But really knowing, that there are things that are too hard, they won't be interested in, and things that are too easy, they also won't be interested in. They want to learn right in that kind of powerful, learning zone. And so supporting parents to provide them with those materials is a big part of this modern Montessori.
And do you feel like part of that support, because this is the thing that I, as a Montessorian, I know, like, if I give my child or a child something and they're not interested in it, well, I'm going to put it away and try again another time, or I'm just going to leave it out and let them discover it on their own. And I wonder if this is part of the support that Monti Kids and modern Montessori are going to give to parents, is this understanding and I think that refraining from getting frustrated. Oh, I bought these beautiful materials and my child's not using them.
Right.
So how that education piece is going to come in so that, adults feel confident with these materials that they're giving to their child and that they're spending money on, right?
Yeah.
That they're investing. Monti Kids is an investment. It is a worthwhile investment. It's an investment in children. So I think the fact that, and maybe you can answer this a little bit more, but the fact that it's not like we're just giving these materials to you and then leaving you to your own devices, that there is support around this. So if a parent puts something out and they're like, my child's not into it, I'm frustrated, where can they go? How can they get support?
Yeah, we have lots of opportunities for that. You know, we know there's lots of different learners in the world, but we have a network of coaches for parents to reach out to one-on-one as a consultation if they're really feeling like they have a lots of topics to cover, or they want to really get a deep understanding of that. And then also you can learn independently in our Parent Learning Center online. So within your account, you know, there's lots and lots of articles and videos, like more than you could need, and then some, because we really know that lots of people glean different things from different ways. And so if you're a video watcher or a listener, you can take it for you on a walk. If you're a reader, there's lots of those as well. So trying to hit all angles for all types of parents.
Which is great. I think that's such a beautiful aspect of Montessori that maybe gets overlooked sometimes, is this idea of honoring how people learn and setting them up for success, right? If you don't have the time to watch a video, well, maybe you can listen to something, or maybe you can read something. And I love that Monti Kids is investing in that. And that feels modern to me, right? Like we have so much at our fingertips, but that can be too much sometimes. So for there to be a place where where adults can go to get information just feels so great. And I feel like maybe that leads us into the fifth part of this a little bit.
Yes, I would agree. I think this fifth one is probably the biggest sort of leap for us, or what makes it most modern from maybe the traditional thinking around Montessori, in that we're really aware of and going to be conscious of each family making their own choices, and not putting specific rules on in order to be Montessori, right? You don't have to fit this mold. Again, we want to meet you where you are on your journey, and don't want to force you to come meet us, right? So wherever you are, you're going to be able to make your own choices. Floor bed or crib, both are great. You know, breastfeeding or bottle feeding, both are great, right? And so where are you?
On a shelf, or putting them on the floor, right? Or utilizing something you already have. You don't have to have a shelf in order to have these materials put out for your child to engage with them.
Yeah, exactly. That, you know, what the rule there is, you know, noticing and providing, right, materials that we've already given you the toolbox. And so for you there is just to find where it fits, and not fitting you into a box that you're not comfortable in, right?
And there's so much judgment around parenting and the choices that we make for our child and for our family. And removing that obstacle for families of, hey, we're meeting you where you are, I think is so beautiful and important. And it's going to make people more excited about this work. It's going to bring people in, I think, rather than people, like you said, feeling like this isn't attainable or isn't for them. Because I believe like Montessori is for everyone. It works for everyone. It's just you have to understand it. And that's where we've kind of created a disservice as Montessorians. I know I've been guilty of doing a little gatekeeping and a little like, oh, I have my training, I'm so smart and I know everything. And now I'm a parent and I'm like, I don't, you know, my husband comes to me and I'm like, I don't know. Like that's my favorite. That's my favorite thing to say for some of this stuff is I don't know, but we could probably find out or figure it out by observing her. You know, there are ways around it, but to feel supported in that rather than judged is such a huge piece. Such a huge piece. So I love that. So how is Monti Kids shifting to offer modern Montessori?
Great question. So when families sign up and begin wherever they are on the sort of timeline or of ages, if you will, when they sign up for the Monti Kids program, they'll also sort of receive this toolkit that I've alluded to, right? And it'll match, you know, their child's developmental stage, obviously. But they'll first get connected with coaching. So you'll be connected with a certified educator who's available for a one-on-one consultation. Even before your toys come, right? You can meet and talk about your space, or not about your space. It can be about toilet learning support or sleep support, navigating tantrums, whatever challenges you're dealing with, right? To help you kind of curate your environment and your space for your little one.
And that person, like we were talking about earlier, you know, the parents that get frustrated with
Yes.
materials. Why isn't my child working with this? Or maybe they're not working with it the way that I was taught by Monti Kids to present it.
Yep.
I would imagine those coaches can help and help work through that as well.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of times I'll have a consult with a family, and then at the end, you know, especially if they're coming from a place of frustration or confusion, it's like, I'm going to check in 6 weeks. You know, this is going to take a little time, and they'll have a couple action items, right? And then just a little. We don't need to solve, you know, all of the problems. Let's do it in baby steps. And then we check in again in 6 weeks and what's working, what's not working, and balancing that for them.
That's huge. That's huge. I have a friend and colleague who's been kind of our coach through this. You know, you think
Wonderful.
I'm an expert, but I also need support. We
do.
all
Yes.
need support. And just having those conversations sometimes, you know, it's like talking to an expert is great, but just talking to someone who's going to listen and maybe provide you with feedback, or maybe just say, wow, that is really hard.
Yeah.
And that comes back to that village piece, right? Of having support in a judgment-free place to ask questions or vent or whatever it is, I think is just absolutely huge. As a consultant myself, working with families, I know that it's really helpful for people to have that. Love that Monti Kids is doing that. What other ways are you implementing this concept of modern Montessori at Monti Kids?
So our curriculum is sort of getting an overhaul, if you will. Instead of focusing on ages and timelines, it's going to be more about noticing, you know, and observing, and what do you see your baby doing? So, you know, development's not linear. We know that, and every child is going to follow their own path. And so it's more about, what are you seeing in your baby when you play together? What are you noticing? And here's some things you might notice, right? It's not going to be just like willy-nilly. We will structure it in a way like, you know, roughly around 4 months, they're going to start reaching for things. And when you notice that, here's what you can do, right? Really solving that timeline solution and making it more about your unique observations of your baby. So revamping the curriculum to be sort of structured around that. And then also providing, you know, instead of a toy timeline, a toy rotation guide, right? And so what does that look like? As opposed to first this, then this, then this. Instead, we'll talk about try this, then this, try that, then, you know, and rotate it through, and really emphasizing the importance of that for learning and also for engagement and concentration. So of course, there will still be toys and this at-home delivery of the educator design toys, right? And we work with what we like to say the world's foremost expert in safety and toy design, especially for wooden toys under the age of 3. We know that our designer knows inside and out all of the rules and guidelines for creating these toys to be safe. And then we also have that coupled with AMI trained educators like myself and the rest of our learning team to make sure that learning goals are met, and they are. So that put together, we really think makes them the best toys in the world for children under 3. So all the parents have to do is play with their little ones.
Yeah. And knowing that they're safe if you do need to turn away to do something, right? I can give Edie one of the, you know, when she was first starting to grasp at 4 months, I can give her one of the grasping materials and do some dishes and not be concerned that something unsafe is going to happen, because I mean, one, I trust you all.
Right.
Two, just looking at it, you can tell that it's safe and beautiful and well made, which is such a big piece of why Monti Kids also has my heart, is because there's so much intention put behind what the children are interacting with. And, you know, Maria Montessori I would say that children, children should live in an environment of beauty. And that fact that, these are beautiful and safe is huge, huge. Yeah.
Great. That's wonderful. Yeah. And I think the last thing that we're going to do to make this modern Montessori shift is to continue to provide village and community. So not just with our team of coaches and experts, but again, this community that we have that you've mentioned, creating sort of this common ground that you're starting from all together, and then working within that space to learn and grow and sort of teach each other. So our own modern Montessori village, if you will.
And how empowering is it that, you think in Montessori schools, we have mixed age groups so that the older children can help guide the younger children learn from the older children, and those roles change as they grow and develop. And it's so empowering to see the older children who were once the babies in class now kind of taking over and leading some things. But what a gift to parents too, of empowering parents to share with one another. Because yes, I may learn what you're telling me, but also you're being empowered by sharing what you did and what worked for you. And I think that's such a big piece of that village that's missing.
Well, I hadn't really thought about that. I love that. Yeah.
That, I know when I share something with, my neighbor's got a 4-month-old. So when I share stuff with her and it works, I'm like, that felt good for me too, to share that. And then now maybe she's going to pass that energy down to another parent or to her husband or whatever it is. So it becomes this kind of paying it forward, but also all parties are benefiting.
Yes.
And that's a big piece that we're missing from our villages not being around anymore. And I like that piece of the modern Montessori, and looking at it that way. Our modern Montessori village. I love that.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm so in. Okay, so our last question, although I could chat with you about this all day long.
It's so fun.
But what do you feel like the biggest takeaway or aha moment you want for parents and caregivers as they hear about modern Montessori?
So something that occurred to me through this conversation is something that we've talked a lot about internally, but I think is an aha moment for us and will translate for parents as well, is that, researching this and talking about it and writing about it and talking about it some more, we've really come to see that modern parenting values, without the word Montessori, align almost exactly with Montessori parenting values, right? When you start to see, like, what are your greatest hopes for your children? What do you want? And it comes back to that independence and resilience and empowerment.
Confidence.
Confidence and all of that, and less about those tangible things and more about these intangible traits. And those align so perfectly with this. So essentially what you're already thinking you want for your children and your parenting is what we hope to support you with and provide you with. And they are the same. And once you're here to join us, it just becomes so, symbiotic, if you will, right? To support you through that. But I think also, this is no longer just about your baby's development and meeting milestones and timelines, right? Now we've really shifted and we want to bring you as parents, like that's the aha for us, is bringing you and your growth and your journey into the adventure so we can become this, village of peers, if you will, and we want to support each other in raising this generation of children, right, that are ready to face challenges and celebrate in community with each other. And we can do that together by bringing you into the journey too, and not just focusing on those smaller milestones, but on this greater, family adventure that you're on, if you will.
I love that. The family adventure. It sure is. It's such a beautiful way way to put it, because adventures, like I think about, traveling, like you either go on a vacation or you go on an adventure, and like the vacation, you're relaxing, and the adventure, you're in it and you're seeing it and you're immersing yourself in it. And so for adults to be able to do that with their children, to immerse themselves in, what stage their child's at, what they're doing developmentally, I think is such a gift. I want, when I think about what I want for parents, it's, because I think I know what I want for kids, but what do I want for adults? What do I want for parents to have? And I want them to feel the same things. I want them to feel empowered and confident and excited, and most of all, joyful. Being joyful with your child is, I think, one of the greatest gifts we can give them, being present. And I love that this idea of modern Montessori is taking that into account, that Monti Kids is really thinking about how can we work together in conjunction. And, one of my favorite parts about the Montessori community is it's so much about collaboration. It's so much about rooting for each other. We're all like, yes, we want you to do well. We want you to enjoy this. And when you're not enjoying this, we want to support you. So that you can get back to a place of feeling good with your child and with your family. And that to me feels like modern Montessori too. Which 100%. Is really exciting.
And I love that point. Like, by the way, it's normal not to enjoy this all the time. Right? Like that is a normal part of growth as a parent. And, bringing again, like all these little nuggets and moments into being, normalized parts of the conversation, I think just supports parents to feel that much more confident.
Absolutely. And we talk, about how important this first 3 years of life is. It's crucial. But we also have to take some of that pressure away and not feel like we need to do everything perfect. Right. The importance of this time of life is that we are knowledgeable and we're learning about our child so that we can best support and guide them, not do everything perfect, not have the child work with everything linearly or, everything's, I'm just looking around my house right now and it's a mess. There's stuff everywhere because Edie was having a blast this morning.
Oh, yay.
And that to me is such an important part of Montessori, is the authenticity of it, that life is messy and beautiful. And we get to observe our children learning how to be humans and learning how to do all the things that make us human, and hopefully in the most positive light as possible, and meeting those needs and everything. So I'm so excited about what Monti Kids is doing and this concept of modern Montessori. And like we talked about earlier with that authenticity piece, that it's not taking away the core. If anything, it feels like you're highlighting the core a little bit more because you're opening up to more people, and change can be hard. Different concepts can be hard, but I want to see this movement grow and grow and grow, because when I look around in our world, I see a lot of people whose needs weren't met when they were in this early phase of life. And the fact that, Monti Kids is really looking deeply to help meet those needs in the family is such a gift to whoever gets to join this community and shout it from the rooftops.
I know. Oh, I love hearing you talk about it because it feels like such a win. Like you get it, you understand it. We're not here to change, Montessori. We're here to shout it from the rooftops and make it accessible and deliver it to families who are ready to learn more. So I'm so glad it's resonating and clear.